Hi folks, this is the second part of my August wrap-up. The first part being my Adventures in YA video, where I talk about the young adult books that I read in August. There were quite a few of them, so if you're interested you can check that out in the cards. But these are the other books that I read in August, and all but one of them are physical books, which makes a change. But the first one was an audiobook, and it is A Place for Us by Fatima Farhin Mirza, and this was beautiful and was one of my favourite books of the year so far. The writing and the characters in this are really what made it. So it's about an Indian Muslim family living in America, and we start with a wedding where one of the daughters is getting married. And the question on everybody's mind is, will Amar, the son who has been absent for some time, will he behave? And then we go back in time and look at how they got to this point and the circumstances that make them think that maybe he won't behave. So it really goes into a lot of depth into the different characters' perspectives. We see the same situation or the same scene from multiple perspectives, and people reflecting on the same scene and thinking about it in very different ways, which is something I always find interesting in literature, you know, where you can have one thing happen and as many different interpretations of that one thing as there are people there. Which is much like the reading experience. I mean, everybody who reads a book is going to read it differently and bring their own viewpoint and perspective background to it. So yeah, I love this, and I love the way that she gets inside the characters' minds and really just notices the small things that really define us. So yeah, that was A Place for Us. And then I read this one here, which is the second book in the Silvana series. There are two out so far. This is Silvana The Turning, and these are by Belinda Mellor. So the first one I read the previous month. I think I talked about it in at least a wrap-up video. And this is the second one, so it follows the son of the main character in the first one, and you kind of expect him to follow a similar path. And this book really subverts your expectations, because you think that, so he is the son of Fabian and Cassandrina, who is a Silvana, and so that defines him. He's different to those around him. And you kind of expect that he's going to follow the same path as his father, and instead he ends up being pulled in all these different directions by different people around him and seems to have no agency of his own. And that's quite frustrating to read, but it gets most interesting further on in the book, where he has an opportunity to, you know, take life by the horns and make his own decisions. And the consequences, again, are not as you expect them to be. So yeah, I think this book felt a lot darker than the first one. It certainly delves into, the first one has darkness in it, but this delves into some themes of themes of agency and almost fate as well, because it feels as though fate is kind of tugging him along in one direction and he doesn't want to go in that direction. Whereas I think the idea of fate comes into the first one, but in quite a different way. It feels as though he was fated to have this wonderful life, and Lysandor, his son, is fated to have kind of the opposite. So yeah, they are quite starkly different. And again, if you like lyrical, quiet fantasy that isn't really heavy on magic, basically I think if you like literary fiction and not so much fantasy, I think you'd like these Anyway, yeah, a lot more character than plot and action. Then we have this one here, which I mentioned in a haul the other day. It's obviously got a beautiful cover, which is why I bought it, but it's got an interesting premise, and that is that in the 1960s, time travel was invented by a group of 4 women, and that of course changes the course of history and absolutely changes the course of these 4 women's lives. One of them in particular who has some kind of breakdown because of her time travel. So that's kind of the main theme, is the psychology around this and all the what ifs. But also you've got a crime story in there too. There's a murder that happens in 2017, and there's time travel involved, and we know that from the beginning. We assume that from the beginning, but yeah, it's not clear how it's involved. And yeah, time travel has this almost church-like institution. Well, it's called the conclave, which obviously makes it seem very, very church-like. And I guess, yeah, they're the ones who hold a lot of power, so they have this monopoly on time travel. And they're the ones who train the people who are to become time travelers, and so that's explored in depth as well. And there are psychological tests that people who are going to be time travelers have to go through, which is obviously a big part of the central theme there. So this was a really, yeah, interesting and fun read, and yeah, I would recommend this if you like something like The Time Traveler's Wife. This explores similar ideas, and has that choppy back and forth in time kind of thing as well, with a mystery at its heart. And I must apologise for the light. Obviously there is light coming in through the window and it's messing up the white balance. But the final book, and this is the best book I've read so far this year. I am obsessed with this book. I need to read it again, and I'm really sorry, but it's not out yet. Terrible, but this is going to be a big book next year. I know it. It's The Binding by Bridget Collins, and can you think of why I might possibly have asked for the proof of this? So I saw it on Simon Savage's channel, and the premise sounded interesting, but mostly it just looked like a beautiful book, and I thought it was one that I could talk about in terms of design. But actually what I want to talk about is how brilliant the book is, except I feel as though I don't want to give away too much, because I'd read the synopsis or the blurb of this, but hadn't really, well, it hadn't stuck in my head anyway. So I was basically going into it blind, and I think that's the best way to do it, because I mean the first part of this is more or less a masterclass in narrative tension, because we don't know what's going on. We're dropped in the middle of this situation, and we're going along with a character in this kind of bleary-eyed, dreamlike state where, yeah, we don't know what's going on. The character doesn't seem to know what's going on. The other characters, one of the characters does and doesn't, and it's all very mysterious. And I think going back and reading that again will be really interesting, knowing what happens later on. But oh, it's so good. There is an LGBT character, or characters. I don't want to give anything away on that front either, but just to let you know that, if that's something that you look for in fiction. And the writing is brilliant. So that's the thing that really drew me in, and that's what I think my favourite books and the best books do, is that they make you want to keep turning pages because the story is so good and you want to know what happens to these characters. But also the writing is so beautiful that you just want to savour every sentence, and it makes you think, right, I want to race through this to know what happens, but at the same time I know I'll come back to it and savor the language even more the second time. So yeah, I think this is going to be a big thing, and yeah, I can't wait to read it again. I can't say enough good stuff about it without giving spoilers. So yes, those were the 4 books that I finished in August that weren't YA. I think I'll be returning to mostly not YA in September. That has been the trend so far, at least, although there are a few things I might get to. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these, or if you're interested in them now I've mentioned them, because I hadn't seen Psychology of Time Travel on BookTube, nor Silvana, and a little bit on The Binding, but because it's not out yet, there's not sort of widespread talk about it. Lots of Instagram pictures of how beautiful it is though. So yes, talk to me down in the comments. As always, thank you very much for watching, and oh, before I go, I'm just gonna do a quick shameless plug, because I've got some new notebooks up on my website and some other products. These are the Magical Textbooks designs, the new ones. So we've got Delivery Owls and Dragons of the British Isles. We've got a couple of divination ones. I won't show you them all in detail, but they have got the bookplate designs and end papers, so they're more like the novel notebooks ones. They're quite, yeah, substantial notebooks in that sense, and they've got lined paper inside. But yes, if you want to have a closer look at those and the other goodies on the site, then I will link that down in the description. Alrighty, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!